Life isn't perfect, and neither are we.
Nope. But we know how to face our fears
And have some fun.
and talk about all the messiest things of life.
Like the messiest things.
Get connected to yourself, get connected to others, and get connected to the life right in front of you.
This is The Connected Life with Justin and Abi.
That's me.
That's you.
And you.
What are you doing?
I'm trying to stay warm in this frigid room.
It is a bit chilly.
It's cold.
Can I tell you something?
Yes.
Can I tell you about our Barnes & Noble date?
Yes, you can tell me about it.
Okay, I think that this is a worthwhile story to start the podcast off with. We recently had a date at Barnes & Noble.
Which I love Barnes & Noble. So for me, I was so excited.
We used to go on Barnes & Noble dates quite a bit.
Yeah.
And then we didn't. And then that stopped happening.
Yep.
And then they put in a new Barnes & Noble,
Yeah,
which I think
and
we
it's
might,
beautiful.
did we talk about it on here before?
I don't know. Anyway.
It's schmancy.
It is.
Okay. And we go into this schmancy Barnes & Noble, but on the way there, I start feeling like suffocated in my soul. And I feel these trappings.
Yes. Panic.
And I'm
I
like,
want to go to Barnes & Noble.
I was like, I can tell that I want to freak out and not go to Barnes & Noble. And I narrated what was going on inside of me.
Which this is so much better because in the beginning of our marriage, I would have just felt some crazy weird emotions, but I had no idea what they meant. And then you probably would have just stormed off at Barnes & Noble's or something.
Yeah. And just had like an internal meltdown of like,
Yes. And it would have felt really abrasive and out of control to me. What is happening?
yeah, totally. So as we're talking, one of the things that was really cool is you engaged in such a kind manner. And you're like, we can take as much time as you need. I want to like ask you questions and we can find out what's going on. And so we end up walking into Barnes & Noble and I'm being treated like a 5-year-old. But it was sweet.
No, what happened is you said you felt overwhelmed.
It's true.
And panicked about how to choose a book.
It's true.
And I said, would you like me to help you?
Yes. And when I say being treated like a 5-year-old, it's not condescending. It was literally like, hey, kid, would you like me to help you understand how to go through Barnes & Noble?
How to find a book.
But it was really tender, and I really appreciated that. I also had a sense of like, just leave me alone. Just leave me alone. But I was like engaging it. I'm like, I'm going to let myself walk this process out. And, you talked about the different genres and different ways that I could go to Goodreads and blah, blah, blah. So you're walking me through all that. And I'm like, I need some space now. And you're like, okay.
So I go on my journey, which the reason I love Barnes & Noble is it feels like anything is possible. Like somehow I'm magically going to find the one book I need, or sometimes I feel like books like call to you and then it's like, yes, I've been needing this story in my life, or the hunt for books. When I find a book I don't want to read, I feel a hit of oxytocin because I feel like I just saved myself like 10 hours of my life. Like, oh, I don't want to read that. Ooh, I figured it out.
You make Barnes & Noble sound like a trip to Willy Wonka's chocolate factory.
It feels like a treasure trove to me. That's how it feels. It's a world of endless possibilities. So I went off on my hunt to like enjoy finding something, and you went off on your hunt, and I'm sitting down trying to look through what I found.
Yeah.
And you come up to me.
Yeah. And I was just like, I had found myself yet again in the comic book section. Because like I can default to that. And then I was like, no, I'm going to power through. I have to face these emotions. And because I really did, I wanted to face the emotions that are happening inside. And I end up sitting down with you and I start narrating like how overwhelming it's been and all the reasons why I feel like I'm falling apart inside of Barnes & Noble.
And you're like, I just want to lay on the ground and scream.
Yeah. And you're like, you should do that. Lay on the ground and scream and shake as much as you want.
I don't think I would have said scream, but like lay on the ground and move around as much as you want.
Like a kid. Yeah. Who's throwing a tantrum.
Yeah.
Which I was like, yes. And then they're going to call an ambulance because they're going to think I'm seizuring over here. No, that's not going to happen. But I did allow myself to like lay back
in your chair.
and
you
I like laughed and started shaking like this. And but there was something, we've talked in a previous podcast about reparenting and different forms of reparenting. And there was this experience of reparenting that was happening inside of this. And well, there was the aspect of your kindness. And the patience in wanting to allow me to, you could have been like, dude, you're just find a freaking book. I'm in Barnes and Noble for my good Barnes and Noble time. Go find a book, Justin, and leave me alone. It's just finding a book, But you're like, man, this is part of our experience today is something's happening in you and we could get some freedom here. And I'll happily participate with patience.
Yeah. And I really did think, because I was like, you're ruining my great thing for me.
Did you think that?
I thought, here's what I thought.
There it is. Honesty.
This is what I thought. I thought, I can come back anytime I want by myself.
What a great thought.
Whatever experience I want.
Yeah.
Right now, I get to be with him. And so for me, what I like, because I think what a lot of times is we're afraid that we're going to miss out on our good experience.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I had that thought of like, oh, I'm not going to get the good experience I was looking forward to. And then I was like, that's fine. I can come back by myself as many times as I want to. This good experience gets to be about us bonding and talking through this. And that ended up being the highlight to me of the trip, as I felt so much closer to you as we processed through it. And you found a book.
I did.
And you found a book that you like.
I'm really liking it.
And you're reading it.
And there's like 9 in the series.
So you're like set for 9 more.
I never have to go to Barnes and Noble again. I will be reading this the rest of my life. It's bigger than the Bible. But I do want to say, again, going back to our conversation today is going to be about reparenting, and specifically reparenting through emotions.
Yeah, we just did a podcast on reparenting and talking about the overall concept, which is a lot of us didn't learn certain skills as kids.
Yeah.
And we have to learn them as adults. And reparenting is the process that we go on how we treat ourselves and how we relearn the things that we never learned. And we had somebody ask us about the podcast. They're like, could you give us things that you'd recommend we do as parents? Because they had heard some things on our podcast. They're like, that's really good. I want to implement that with my kids. And me and you always are like, we won't give parenting advice.
Oh, I try to keep it minimal, even though I can tell you mostly all the problems in parenting based on people who've come through my office.
Totally. Yeah, we've seen thousands.
This is why it was wrong.
We've seen thousands of clients for like, I don't know, 30,000 hours. We've done so much work with people that we can see what we've done a lot of work with. But while I can't say this is how to be a parent because I don't have kids, we can talk about what we had to do to reparent ourselves in the areas of emotions. And if you're parents out there, you can think, I can parent my kids this way so they don't have to reparent themselves years down the road. But the beautiful gift is the redemption of reparenting.
Yep. So before we get started into the kind of reparenting on the emotion thing, I'll add a couple things. One, it was a great reparenting moment, and I was getting to reparent levels of emotions as I was getting to allow love in and patience into that space and connect to feeling, allowing myself to feel the emotions instead of stuff and then like melt down. But I was actually like, oh, I'm feeling the disturbance. I'm feeling the war with my ADD in this environment and all of that stuff. And I'm narrating it and being present with it. And so that was very powerful. So
yeah, because as a kid, you didn't know that you were allowed to like have those emotions and be able to work through it with someone.
Yeah. And that wouldn't even know how to articulate what they were, right? Like that's not a thing that most people in childhood grow up with, even being able to articulate what the emotion is. Yeah. It's just meltdown. So, but that before we get started, if you're not over on YouTube, I just want to say you should head to YouTube and have fun with us over here at The Connected Life and see our beautiful faces.
Aww.
And if you are on YouTube, you should hit the subscribe button and hit the bell button so that you know when these get released.
Aww.
So I thought I'd interject that there.
Yeah.
That's all. I watch people on YouTube and they're like, I will interrupt the middle of my thing to tell you to subscribe. And I'm like, that's a good idea. Subscribe. Because this is going to be a great episode. You don't want to miss great episodes.
Yeah. Love it. I love it. Okay. So, let's jump into reparenting. A great example is this moment. And I do want to say reparenting was you noticing the little kid in you freaking out. And instead of shoving them down when we were going to Barnes & Noble, you actually gave that part of you a voice. And this is a great example. I think that your ADD created some learning difficulties for you as a kid.
My ADD that I was unaware of until recently diagnosed with it.
How old were you when you were diagnosed?
41.
So,
been fighting it 41 years.
Yeah. And there was a lot of things that were hard to learn for you when you were a kid. You were really smart at certain things, but there were a lot of things that felt really hard to learn, but there wasn't a grace or a compassion or an understanding for that. So a lot of you got stuck back in those moments where you were beating yourself up. Just figure this out, Justin. Just figure this out.
Yeah.
Just push through this, Justin. Just push through this. Why can't you know how to do this already? And so what happened at the Barnes & Noble is a great example of, instead of saying just push through this.
Yeah, and just find a book and just be here and just settle in. Yeah,
you actually were able to let that part come out so it could integrate in.
And come out in a healthy way.
Yes.
Right? Instead of me just like,
which is what in the past you would have done. You would have gotten short
Grumpy
or gruff because you were overwhelmed or your senses were overwhelming you. And so you would have just been like, whoa. And I would have been left feeling very confused about what was happening.
Why are we having a bad date at Barnes & Noble or whatever?
And I would have felt like I didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah. So one of the foundational things to reparenting through emotions is the capacity to get present and narrate, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that I didn't know. We've talked about narration on the podcast. I didn't know how to narrate.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to say, hey, let me describe my inner world. I could describe how you were my problem or that guy over there was my problem, but I couldn't describe what was actually happening inside of me.
Yes.
Like I can tell I'm feeling a heightened amount of anxiety and overwhelm. I didn't even know. Yeah, let me back up. And I think that this is true for a lot of people. A lot of people cannot identify very many emotions. So when I would have clients come into my office, I'd say, what do you feel? They'd say, angry? Nothing? Like there was a handful of them. Sad? But like the feeling, like we don't have a language oftentimes for emotions.
Yeah.
And even if you give a person a word like, oh, you're feeling shame, especially you can tell they're feeling shame. You know what shame feels like. They're articulating it and they're like, nope. Don't feel no shame. You're like, but that shame you described. And so what you notice is people have a disconnect between what a word is and what it feels like inside. And that's foundationally first and foremost is we have to kind of expand our language and expand our knowledge of what are these emotions and what do they feel like inside of me?
Yeah, I remember when I was in my 30s. Now, we'd been doing emotional health for years at that point, and I was an all-star. Like all my counselors thought I was amazing because I could articulate so much. Or none of them were trained well enough. Like I feel a little disheartened that my counselor finally in my late 30s called me on it, and she was like, you can talk a lot about feelings, but I don't actually know if you feel them. And she started having me list the emotions that I felt. And some things I listed aren't even emotions. And then she would have
constipation.
And then she would have me list like, well, where do you feel that in your body? I was like, what do you mean feel it in my body? What do you mean? And and then she'd be like, well, what does sadness feel like? I'm like, what do you mean? What does sadness feel like? I got so offended, and she had me draw what emotions felt like in my body. There's like a body picture, and I had to draw like, is it swirly? And I got so angry. I was like, this is so stupid. I can't believe I'm paying for this. And then like by the end, all of a sudden I was just sobbing uncontrollably, and I was like, what is this voodoo? And that started me on the journey of recognizing I didn't know how to recognize my emotions and name them. And something that's interesting is, so emotions are energy. Every emotion has an energy, and our body feels that energy.
Yeah.
So every emotion we feel in some way in our body. Most of us have been taught to ignore that, so we're not aware. If you've gone through a lot of trauma, you often are very disconnected from your body. And so you have to learn how to get into your body and understand what's happening inside of it. But the energy in our bodies is connected to the emotion, and we can actually do something with that so that we can move through the emotion. There's a couple ways to move through emotions. And one is you have to know what the emotion is. There's something so powerful about naming it. Naming an emotion, partially when we name the emotion, the blood flow in our brain goes from our amygdala, which is our emotion processing center, to our executive function. Just by naming the emotion, we're getting some of the blood flow back to the logic center. And then when we can describe what's happening in our body with it, we are then able to start, again, keeping the blood flow in the executive function. So we have just that creates a little bit of space between us and our emotion, because we don't want our emotions overwhelming us where we are lost in them. We want to be able to see them, look at them, observe them, feel them, and move through them. And so one of the most important things is learning what emotion am I feeling. And parents can do this. Pizzi is so good at this with her kids. So she'll look at something, maybe Moses, when he was young, would be crying about something. And she'd be like, oh, I just took a toy away from him. It would make sense that he feels sad. Do you feel sad right now? Or oh, I just told him, no. Do you feel shame? So she would, as he went on, she could actually say, are you feeling this? Or you might be feeling this. And he started to learn to name feelings as they were happening. Are you feeling angry? Yes. Yeah. You're mad. Yeah. And then what else is under the anger? Just the ability to start naming emotions. And I know for me,
well, and let me add this, there was an investigative process that's happening there, which this is a huge part of reparenting, right? A lot of people don't want to stop long enough to look. And that very much goes back to a childhood experience, right? Which is, there either isn't capacity for parents, or there isn't any interest from parents, as a couple of options, to stop and want to get connected and be present and help understand and foster that dialogue, right? And so when it comes to even our personal process that you're talking about, you're watching Pizzi do that, there's something about reparenting ourselves where when we stop and we go, I want to get present long enough. There's value to me as a human being that I want to get present long enough to explore, ask questions, get curious, and try to learn more about the person that's in the mirror.
And this is the beautiful thing. Regardless of how you were parented, you now have the power to parent yourself the way that you needed, regardless if they paid attention and wanted to connect to you or not. You now get to decide, how am I going to treat myself? Am I going to take time to investigate what feeling are you feeling? What emotion is going on? What is that like? And that to me was part of reparenting myself, is exploring emotions and learning what they felt like. I had to have people point them out to me. I didn't know that I had ever felt rejection, which ChatGPT says is not an emotion, but is a experience.
ChatGPT has not got its kinks worked out at all.
Well, I'm just saying, I don't know that rejection is an emotion, but I have emotions from rejection, but I just never knew I felt anything around that at all, alone or disconnected, or I didn't belong, or pushed away. I think rejection is an emotion, but...
Well, ChatGPT is not a human, okay? It is a robot, and it doesn't know.
But my point is, I didn't even know I felt that.
Yeah, totally.
I didn't know I felt fear. This is crazy. I literally didn't know I felt fear. When me and Pete filmed Pathway to Freedom, she said every emotion comes back to fear. And I was like, no way. That can't be true. Because I was like, I never feel fear, but I always feel shame. Like, I'm like, I feel shame all the time. Like, I had a few emotions I could recognize. It was like shame and anger. Those were the two that I could recognize.
Yeah.
And so I knew what those were. And, but then as time went on, I was like, oh, I actually feel fear. I just didn't notice. I was doing all kinds of weird things around fear. I had fear for forever, and I was doing a lot of activity to avoid it, activity to shove it away. It created a lot of messes in my life, but I hadn't learned, oh, this is what fear is. This is what it feels like. I didn't know what anxiety was, like.
Then you realize you're a ball of it.
100%. I didn't know I had all of those things. So it is the idea of learning to just, and you can get a feelings wheel. I try to get something that's very, and maybe we'll post this. We have a feelings chart that we use because I don't want too many emotional choices. It feels overwhelming to have too many, but I learned about a few.
Yeah.
I learned about being confused. That's an emotion that I had huge reactions to, but for years I didn't even know I felt confused. I didn't even know that was. So something you can do is get an emotions wheel and then start to notice what did I feel today? And when have I felt this before? And if you are like, I don't know what this emotion feels like, ask other people to describe it and give yourself time, because it took me a few years to open up my experiential understanding of emotions.
Yeah. I want to say this. I know that there's a lot of people that think emotions are ridiculous. The idea of learning about emotions seems silly and stupid. Mm-hmm. The problem is that as humans, we're constantly experiencing emotions. Mm-hmm. Like, they're existent whether or not you want to acknowledge them. Emotions exist. Mm-hmm. And they're a part of our human condition that when we are not willing to acknowledge them and go on the hunt to understand them, that we are denying. And so there's a part of me as a human being that, like, I kept feeling unconsciously unworthy and unloved in different aspects because I was denying a piece of my humanity that I wouldn't allow myself to put interest in.
Yeah.
And part of parenting is the aspect of nurturing. So part of when we nurture a child, we're actually putting interest into their experience as a human. We're putting interest into their likes and their dislikes and their behavior patterns. It's like, again, it's interest. And so when I begin to put interest into myself, interest into how I function, there is an aspect of nurture that I am actually giving to myself.
Yes.
And I'm reparenting myself.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people who currently have unresolved pain with their parents because they won't engage in the personal reparenting process.
Yes.
Because I need something from you that I believe that I can't give myself or I can't ever get. And I keep trying to get something from you that you don't have the capacity to give. So I live in a perpetual sense of bitterness, resentment, and frustration. But when I am willing to engage a reparenting process,
yes,
I can relieve you from the duty or the expectations of fulfilling something you can't that I need, and I can actually become powerful, give myself this experience, and now I get liberated, I get seen, I can feel more love, and I can liberate you from the unforgiveness I'm holding towards you.
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah, I think the other thing is emotions take time and space, and I think we want to avoid them because we feel overwhelmed. Like, most people as kids didn't learn how to manage their emotions. And so as a kid, my emotions felt out of control. They felt like they were ruling me. It felt completely overwhelming to face my feelings. And so I didn't want to spend more time learning about emotions.
Right.
I'm trying to avoid it instead of learning there is a way for our emotions to not control us. And that's one of the things that we're wanting to talk through in this reparenting episode is how do you have a healthy relationship with your emotions? What we all needed was parents who showed us. We needed to see them have a healthy relationship with their emotions. Like we needed to have parents who knew what they were feeling, who could articulate it, and who could manage those. And then we needed them to help us learn to articulate and us learn how to manage those. And exactly what you're saying about what we lost or lacked, we have the power to give ourselves. And most of us are so avoidant of emotions because we're scared we're going to get swept into them and we're going to get fully lost in them again. And so the idea of like, what would it look like? Sometimes if I can just visualize a powerful person who knows their emotions, but isn't getting lost in them. That is my goal of who I'm going to become. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I want to say that a lot of people that are scared of getting lost inside of emotions, that's due in part to the idea that we don't understand that there's a difference between our adult self and our child self. Mm-hmm. So as an adult, I am very capable. Mm-hmm. I am capable at learning, growing, developing,
yes,
changing, right? As a kid, there could be a lot of ways that we felt very incapable. And especially when it came to emotions, a kid doesn't know how to regulate themselves. They don't know what to do with the emotions that they're having, and they're looking to something outside of themselves
to say, show me how I can be okay.
Show me how to be okay. So then when we become an adult and we're faced with emotions, we actually trigger into our child self.
And we're looking around to find someone to tell us how to be okay.
We're 8 years old again and we're freaking out. Show me how to be okay. I don't know how to do this emotion stuff. I can't do this. This is bigger than me. That's not an emotion that an adult is having.
Yeah.
You may be in your adult body, but you're not an adult having that emotion. You're suddenly in your kid emotion. And the kid has hijacked your world. So some of you might be listening and being like, I totally identify with feeling like emotions are going to swallow me alive.
Yeah.
Identify that as, okay, that's my child self talking.
Yes.
That's my child self that needed someone bigger than me to help them regulate.
And some of you are like, is my child self ruling the entire time?
Totally.
Because you're like, I never feel like different than the emotions are going to swallow me up. And I think that feels real. When I met you, I was living in my child self a lot of the time. I was really stuck. You know, hard things happen when you're a kid and you kind of get stuck there unless you have the ability to heal and integrate forward. And so there was so much that I was overwhelmed and where things felt too big for me. And so again, we get the process of reparenting helps us start to take care of that little kid. Instead of what we try to do is just shove the little kid in a box and be like, we'll just try to pretend it doesn't exist. And then the kid explodes and behaves and is all crazy. And we're like, wow, what just happened? Why did you just tell mom off? Why did you just freak out on that person? Why did you start crying uncontrollably in the grocery store? And it's because we have shoved our little kid in the box. And so our goal is if we can start to be present and aware and compassionate towards our little kid, what is our little kid feeling? And what emotion? So this is how, if I was going to reparent, this is how I reparent myself a lot. First, I'll notice what is the emotion that I'm having. I'm feeling scared. I'm feeling scared of rejection. I'm feeling scared of disconnection. I'm feeling scared that I'll be alone. I'm feeling scared that my needs will never get met. So I'll look at, I'm feeling scared. And then I'll think about what does that feel like in my body? That's one of the next questions. What does it feel like in my body that I'm scared? Oh, I feel like anxiety, like rushing, kind of like prickly fingers all the way up. And I feel like I want to jump out of my body because it feels like it's overwhelm in my body to feel that fear. And it feels intolerable to feel that fear. And then I might be like, what does my body want to do with this energy? So like, do I need to shake it out? Do I need to dance it out? Do I want to crawl into a ball? And I will often, like, I'm not doing this in the middle of the day every day. But honestly,
you're
like,
at the mall and you just go into a ball. That's Sephora. Goodbye.
Yeah. But even like that was a little bit why I was like, if you want to get on the floor at Barnes and Nobles, go ahead. Like, I don't care. But I don't necessarily do it in the middle of a store, but there's a lot of things I can do in the middle of the store. So like, let's say I'm feeling overwhelming anxiety. My senses are overwhelmed by what's happening. I could do heel stomps in a store and not look weird. It could just look like I'm standing on my tippy toes and then coming to the ground and then standing on my tippy toes and then coming to the ground. Or I could shake my hands if I wanted, or I could like clasp my hands back and forth. Like, there's a lot of movement that you can do. And I'll just do movement. Even if you do it for 1 minute, you'd be surprised how much 1 minute of like, maybe I see anxiety and feel it like a flood, like a river that's rushing inside of me. And so maybe I'm just letting the river out for a minute. And then you'll find that you have just a little bit more tolerance for what's going on. Because the emotion wave, we teach on this in LCMC. Honestly, our Life Consulting Masterclass, our year-long program, people actually learn. We reparent them in all of the ways about how do you actually walk through emotions and what do you do with it and how do you understand yourself. And it's beautiful for people. People get to feel that care, that attention, and like someone's bigger than them helping them know how to take care of themselves. And a lot of times we need someone else to teach us how to take care of ourselves before we can take care of ourselves. So in that class, we talk about the motion wave, which is like anxiety, fear, shame, loneliness, hurt, all of the feelings that we feel. It feels like a wave in our body, whether we're aware of it or not. And so we do a lot of things to shut that wave down, because the wave is like building. And what we don't learn, most of us, I didn't learn that emotions have a wave, but they always come down. I didn't learn that. And so I've actually had to learn to ride the wave now, which is when my anxiety is building, instead of being like, it's because what you feel is it's going to feel like this forever.
Totally.
How bad is it going to get? I'm never going to get out of this. This is what I'll be like forever. And so I've learned like, no, this is the emotion wave is building, and every wave comes down. And I have the ability to know it's going to have a come down. I'm going to make it through the intensity that is building. And it could be, depression. Like, it could be numbness that is building. And the idea is like, okay, there is this wave happening inside of me. It will end. And I have the power to help myself come down. And some of the ways I help myself come down is to learn how to label it, to learn how to have compassion for it. So I don't want to, like a lot of us, I have to learn how to have compassion for it. And then I have to learn how to move my body to move through it. Those things really help with emotions. I didn't realize how much judgment I had towards emotions. I was like, anger, it was okay, because it was a strong, powerful emotion. Yeah. But like feeling rejected, like it felt almost suffocating to me to feel that feeling.
Humiliating.
Yeah. It felt that's good. It's suffocating is a physical sensation, but I felt like so weak to acknowledge I felt rejected. Like it took me years to say I felt rejected by you in marriage. First of all, because I didn't know that I felt rejected.
Right.
And because I like avoid it at all costs.
Yeah.
And then, but I'm like, when I started telling you, oh, that makes me feel rejected, that vulnerable emotion was much easier for you to hear.
Yes. It was way easier for me to hear because like I didn't get a spiky jacket. I didn't get hard reactions.
Yeah. Normally when I felt rejected, I just reject back, or I would throw a fit back.
Right.
Or
so it's like the message that's sent is that this person's just a jackass.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I came off really hardened.
Right.
Yeah.
But when we engage in a vulnerable emotion, this person isn't a jerk. This person actually is letting me know like something is happening that feels very painful for them. And they're doing it in a way that's non-attacking. Yeah. Which is very helpful.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. When you learn emotions, when you learn emotions, you will notice that there are things that you judge.
Yes.
And we have to release judgment, because basically judgment is resistance. If you think about the emotion wave, if you imagine like an actual ocean wave and you're in the ocean and you just are like, I'm going to try to resist the wave and pretend it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
That is not going to work for you. Like, just ignoring that a wave is happening doesn't make the wave go away. And then just trying to like stand against it doesn't make it like impact you less. Like, you have to learn how to go with the wave and understand the wave. And part of that is removing your judgment of the emotions that are coming up.
So one of the ways you're talking about the wave, excuse me, you're talking about the wave. And one of the things that people often do, they don't know that they're doing this, but they're trying to prematurely exit the wave through medicative means.
Absolutely.
So all of a sudden they're on that wave of fear, anxiety, and then maybe they're defaulting to masturbation. Maybe they're defaulting to going
online shopping, cleaning the house, going for a run.
Any other ones?
Sorry. I got them for days.
Sometimes people...
Calling someone on the phone.
Interrupting people.
Yeah.
So there are some of you out there that have even had a judgment on your medicative behavior. And it's because you weren't taught that emotions have a wave and there's a healthy way to ride the wave out. And you don't know how to ride the wave out. So there's no guarantee that someone's going to come relieve you from the experience of that emotion wave. Maybe it's that pain, it's that sense of rejection, it's that depression. And so again, you're going, I have to take matters into my own hands. I haven't been taught a healthy way to experience this. I will eject myself out of it. Good old heroin. Such an extreme option. So yeah,
I just all of a sudden have to go play video games.
Yeah.
I just need to scroll on my phone right now.
Yeah.
And what people don't realize is you can actually build up tolerance
for experiencing the wave.
It's called emotional distress tolerance. And it's something that every human needs to learn, which is like, I can feel this and it's not going to overwhelm me and crush me.
Yes.
And I am going to be okay.
And I'll make it through to the other side.
Yeah.
One of the words that I want to bring up is, or the phrase is intolerable emotions.
We're going to do a whole episode on that soon.
Are we? You've decided that needs to happen?
With Ruth. She's coming.
I'm so excited. So to like tee you guys up for that, intolerable emotions are easily said are these emotions that we are wanting to avoid at all costs.
Yep.
Right. And so there are some of us that are not aware of this intolerable emotion that we have. So we don't actually take time to be like, oh, I have an intolerable emotion. I actually need to face and figure out why it's intolerable. So it's unconsciously words, Justin. It's unconsciously in the back of our head feeling like, I don't want to face this. I don't want to face this. I don't want to face this. And so we, again, prematurely eject ourselves out of an emotion wave. But if we actually can face the realities of, here's an intolerable emotion, I have ways to deal with an intolerable emotion, we can stay on those emotion waves and ride them out in healthy ways.
A great example for this would be rejection for me. So rejection is one of my intolerable emotions. I avoided it at all costs in my life and in my marriage. And so I would do a ton of behaviors to get out of any situation where I could feel rejected. Whether it's like, I don't need you, or I'll reject you first.
I'll control a situation. I'll shut you down.
Yes. All kinds of things.
All fun, and I'll make you happy.
But I was never aware because I had never even known that rejection existed. I remember admitting I felt rejected felt like one of the hardest things I had ever done. Like, it was almost excruciating for me to just acknowledge that I felt rejection, because I had so much judgment and shame about the idea of rejection. Now,
did it feel like your soul was on fire?
It did. It did. It felt horrific to me. And the thing about it is one of the judgments I realized is that I felt like if you feel rejected, you're bad.
Yes.
And so what I had to recognize is, wait, every
like
human,
a lesser person.
yeah. I had to recognize every human feels rejection. That's a human emotion.
Yeah.
So if I feel it, that doesn't mean I'm not a good human. I'm not worthy of love. If I feel it, it means I'm a human on the planet. And so when I started to just feel it, just owning that I felt it felt hard. And I remember that with fear, just owning that I felt fear was hard. It felt like this concept that felt so challenging to me. And so learning how to acknowledge our feelings and take that shame away from them, take the rule or the belief that we have associated. Like we work with a lot of clients who hate anger and they refuse to feel anger, and anger feels like an intolerable emotion, probably because they had somebody that was angry in their childhood.
Yeah.
So they're like, I'll never feel this emotion. But anger is an important part of processing through feelings. You need anger to healthily set good boundaries and be connected to yourself. Like anger is an important emotion. It shouldn't be the only emotion that we feel.
It is one that's especially human and necessary to feel.
And so people have had to actually go on the journey of forgiving the emotion and be like, hey, anger isn't what hurt me. My parent not knowing how to manage anger is what hurt me.
Yes.
Anger isn't what destroyed our family. My parents not knowing how to get through the emotion wave is what destroyed our family. Or our parents not, our parents not talking about things. For us, sometimes you'll say, like I'll say, oh, I can feel a lot of anger coming up. And even just, you can release the energy.
Naming it.
Through starting to name it. You can actually start to and that's why we narrate so much. And this is such a huge part of reparenting it, which is I'm aware enough of what's going on inside of me that I can name what's going on inside of me. The opposite of reparenting is where I'm so aware of what's going on inside of you that I have no idea what's going on inside of me.
Yeah.
And that's codependency. So we want to be able to know our own journey, what is happening inside of us, our own feelings, our own experiences. And then even if I narrate them to myself, sometimes I'll be like, wow, I can feel my walls are going up. Wow, I can feel I'm really overwhelmed right now. Again, there's a thing called reality congruence. We teach about this. That when your reality is confirmed, it feels safe to your body. There's a place where you can just breathe in deep. So like Pizzi does this really well with her kids. They'll be like, Mom, you seem stressed. And she'll be like, you're right. I am stressed. Mm-hmm. I have a lot of anxiety going on. And it's about this, not about this. Like it's about the housework. It's not about you guys or whatever it is. That reality congruence, having somebody say that what you feel is happening is so healing to the human soul. It's the opposite of being gaslit. So many people have so much pain from feeling like their reality was denied. So when I say, no, the reality is I am feeling anxiety, my own soul takes a deep breath in and is like, you're right. I am feeling that. And it feels so relieved for me to call what is. And on that note, a lot of times people might say, no, that's not happening because they don't have the word for it. They don't have a word association to that. They may not be connected to the feelings that are happening inside of them. So there's a ton of denying certain realities because we don't know any different or any better. I do want to circle back to judgment of emotions. Because I think you brought up a really good point. We oftentimes carry a lot of judgment towards certain emotions. So some of you out there might be like, you know what? I actually don't think it's okay to be happy. So good. Like people who are happy are seen as people who aren't connected to reality. Mm-hmm. And they're denying other pain. If you allow yourself to be happy, then you're just ignoring all the difficult things inside of the world. Some people might have judgment, and you talked about like in a household where anger hurts someone, right? Like you might be like, I saw this with a lot of clients.
people had judgment towards sadness. Yep, I refuse to feel sad. Sadness is a terrible emotion. Sadness destroyed our family. What do you mean sadness destroyed our family? Well, my mom was so sad that she was in bed all the time. She ended up just becoming depressed. And it's because of sadness that their marriage fell apart. And I'm like, no. And then you brought up, it's not about the emotion sadness that was a problem. It was about the approach to it. It was about how a parent or somebody took that emotion and managed it. And so one of the things that we're talking about in this episode, as you go on the journey of reparenting, it's actually about becoming really powerful and being able to self-manage. And part of that self-management begins again with the awareness. And then, okay, now that I'm aware of it, now what do I do with this? How do I participate with these emotions? Because they're not going to go away. I will still have them. So I had so many clients that are like, I'm never sad. I'm not sad. Sad's not a thing I have. No, you're deeply sad inside of yourself. You don't have a full life. You're not vibrant because you're just packing around like 10,000 gallons of sadness inside of yourself that you won't acknowledge and you won't move through. Like you talked about the emotion wave. You won't actually learn how to ride the wave of it and move through it. And so one of the things that really needs to be highlighted for people as you're listening is you have to ask the question, are there emotions that I've judged and I've told myself I'm not allowed to feel these? And if I am allowed to feel the whole gamut of emotions, what does it look like to healthily feel them? Can I actually feel and express these emotions that I saw that I felt like I should never touch ever again? Is there a way to do that that is responsible? It's healthy?
Yeah. So like a great example would be anger. Like you still have times when you feel angry.
Absolutely.
But you don't express
like right now.
But you don't express it by yelling anymore.
No.
Or hitting the wall.
No. Or if I do need to express it in a body expression like that, I will take it somewhere.
By yourself.
By myself.
Without me.
And unload it.
Yes.
And allow it to move through my body.
Yes. And for me, like sadness is a great example. My mom did get lost in sadness. She like never came out. And I think that there is that fear. If we let ourselves feel something, will we ever be able to get out of it?
Yeah.
And there's a couple things. I think we're allowed to have boundaries. So healthy parents, and a lot of my counselors have come in and they're like, okay, we're not going to feel this to that level. So like maybe they'll be like, can you feel rejection for a minute? And then we're actually going to feel a happy emotion. And we're going to switch the channel in your brain now to a happy emotion. We're going to titrate back to something that feels safe. So there's actually a level of like, I'm going to let myself feel, but I'm not going to let myself feel too much. And that is a like, I've been around kids where they're having feelings and like maybe they're crying, that's normal. And then there's like a second gear that they get into where it's like they've just lost their mind.
They're gone.
And so what we're doing is I should be able to have boundaries with my emotions. So with rejection, I was like, I'm going to feel the intolerable feeling for like 2 minutes. I'm going to feel it and I'm going to say that I own it. And then I'm going to go feel something. And when I talk about feeling something safe, like I'm going to think about a time that I felt really loved by someone. I'm going to think about a time that I felt really connected. I'm going to think about a time that I felt like I belonged, or I'm going to go for a walk where I feel the sun. Like you can actually balance your emotions.
Yep.
You can actually put boundaries on them. You're allowed to so when I was a kid, emotions overtook my entire body and I felt imprisoned to the emotions. I felt like they were a slave master to me. And there wasn't somebody that stepped in that said like, okay, we don't have to go this far. And even things like learning breathing actually helps you regulate your body. You can learn how to regulate your nervous system. And if you're out there and you have kids, you can start learning polyvagal theory. But there is science to learning breath work, regulation activities, learning how to ground. We won't go into those in this session, but there are limits that I can take. If I start to feel like the emotion is getting too big where it's going to overwhelm me, I can pull back And instead of like, I'm not using this to shove the emotion in the closet anymore. So we've got to imagine emotions are like kids. I used this analogy before. You can't throw them in the trunk of your car and you can't let them drive your car. So I want emotion to be with me in the back seat of the car, you know, in a safe place where I can feel it. So rejection is there, but I'm also connecting to love. And I'm not going to let rejection be I'm not going to feel rejection for 30 hours. I'm going to feel it for a little bit. And then I'm going to put some boundaries on it. And I might say, hey, I'll come back to feel you tomorrow, but I can't feel you all of the time. And I think people have never been taught they're allowed to put boundaries with emotions. It's black or white. Either I feel it all the way and it's in control of me, or I don't feel it at all and I lock it up. And a healthy mix is I allow myself to feel my feelings, but I also have boundaries on how deep I feel, for how long I feel. And that makes you have a sense of autonomy and power so that you don't have to be stuck.
Yeah, I have a friend, we have a mutual friend that when he went through his divorce, this is a story I share often, but it was great, is that he did exactly this, is he had boundaries around his pain process.
Yeah.
And that looked like some days he allowed himself to just lay in bed, be depressed, and be like, I'm not being accessible to the world at all in any way, shape, or form. And then, he'd get himself up and be like, I have to go have fun.
Yep.
I am going to go play and act like nothing wrong is happening inside of my life. And it was the back and forth of that actually walked him through it. And that was healthy self-parenting.
Yeah. And
right?
I've talked about, like, when I had PTSD, I worked a lot because I needed something to help put boundaries on my emotions because my emotions were so out of control. I needed some lines that were like, but we're not going to live with you out of control all day long, every day. And there is healthy compartmentalization. And so that is part of reparenting, is not only do I learn to name and feel my emotions, but I also learn how to turn the volume down on them so that they don't overwhelm me and overtake me. I learned to turn the channel. Like, one thing that will happen to me is my body will get really overwhelmed, maybe with anxiety. And one thing for me that works is I'll call a friend who's like, whenever they process about their life, it just makes me laugh. And
because their life is so crappy.
No, their life is actually pretty entertaining. Yeah. But what it does is it switches the channel in my brain and it helps me get out of being stuck in that. And so I will still go back to whatever emotions I need to process, but I do it in measured amounts. And you've got to know where you're coming from. If you've had too big of feelings, you need to learn how to set boundaries. I've had so many counselors be like, we're not going to feel all of your pain today. I actually don't want you to go into your story. Actually, we're going to spend a lot of time seeing if you can learn how to feel good. Can we think about things that make you feel good? Okay, we're going to touch sadness for 30 seconds. Now we're going to feel good again. That ability to actually learn, hey, I can feel sad and I can come out of that. I can feel an emotion and I can switch gears. That is so beautiful and healthy for us to be able to do. But if you're somebody who's never felt feelings and all you do is switch gears and all you do is shut off and go have fun, then you need to practice spending more time. Like, I'm going to spend more time with my feelings. I'm going to spend more time feeling without switching the channel right away.
Yeah, that's good. I know that we got to wrap things up. Did you have any final things on this you wanted to say?
Well, why don't you start with your final things?
Oh, because you want to have the last word. Is that
no,
what it is?
I just hadn't thought about it yet.
Classic Abby and her last word.
I hadn't thought about it yet. I don't know.
I think that, in my own personal journey, me tending to my emotions and exploring them has caused me to feel a lot more confident in life, because I don't feel alone. It began to shatter this sense of aloneness that was hidden within me. I didn't know that it existed there. Like, I didn't know it until I started like really digging in and connecting. I'm like, oh, I felt alone because I didn't feel an aspect of parenting, if you will, in this area of my life. But now that I'm invested in this, I'm feeling that this parenting process, like me investing in this, has brought a sense of someone being there, me, the adult Justin, into that space. And so I feel more safe within myself. I feel, again, more confident because I don't feel alone. And another aspect to that is I'm feeling much more understood. So part of healing, it's like some people will be listening and be like, I constantly feel alone. I feel this sense of abandonment in my life. But the more that I understood myself in this form of a reparenting process, the less I felt abandoned, right? It's that understood. We need to feel understood, and we can understand ourselves. It sometimes feels like a burden to stop, but usually that sense of this is a burden to waste my time going into this is actually rooted in the emotion you talked about earlier that Pete shared, which is fear. It is, I'm just scared. And I chalk it up to that's unnecessary, that's pointless. No, it's I am scared. And I think that as one of our first emotions, it's really good to acknowledge is like, where are the areas in my life that I'm scared, especially when it comes to my emotions? Because if I can actually learn how to break the fear that's between me and those emotions, I can begin to do all the other work that's really necessary. So that's what I'd have to say.
I love that. Yeah, I think talking about the balance of feeling like we have autonomy, a couple things that really felt like it gave me power over my emotions was learning to move my body to help my body release emotions. That really helped. And there's so many different things you can do. There's so many different things you can do. We have a regulation library that we are about to let open to the public. There's a lot of physical actions and visualizations and exercises that you can do to help your brain. You know, I was talking to one of the teachings we did is for kids, you can ask them a crazy illogical question to help their brain come back online when they're lost in emotions. So if you're like, is the sky purple? And they have to think about like, no, the sky's not purple. Or like, you know, like some kind of question that they have to answer that can actually help the blood flow come out of the flooded area back into their logic functioning system. And so when I taught on that, we've had parents do that and they're like, wow, it really does help my kid start to regulate, or learning to breathe with your kid, or learning to, and so when we start to do those things with ourselves, oh, I'm starting to get dysregulated. What are the things I can do with myself? And what I've learned is when I pay attention to myself, now I'm recognizing my emotions when they're at like a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Before, I only knew my emotions when they were at a 10. And once they're at a 10, they are overwhelming and they are controlling me. But when I notice them at a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I can do something with them. Our goal with emotions is to not get to the place where we're flooded, and to find ways to not get lost in them. I want to have a relationship with my emotions where it's like peer to peer, where I can see them, I can observe them, I can touch them, but they are not dominating, controlling, or enslaving me. And if I start to notice, if I know myself enough, I can recognize those emotions when they're at a tolerable level for me to connect and move through, instead of the place where they just take over and destroy me. And so I wanted to just read a couple emotions so that people can like think through this really quick as we end, so they can think through which ones do I feel and which ones do I not feel, and what judgments do I have on them. So scared or fear, shame or embarrassment, remorse or guilt, anger, sadness, aloneness, confusion, hurt, hopelessness, numb, disgust, contempt. And then good ones, joy or happiness, love or being loved, relief. That's one of my favorite emotions.
I'll feel that when I get up and go to the bathroom here in a second.
Safe and secure, peace, contentment, excited, thankful or grateful, stable or grounded, hopeful, powerful, confident. Like, so like, are those even positive emotions? Are there positive emotions that do I not feel confident? Do I notice when I feel confident? That's something I want to be more aware of. And that's a way that I've balanced my emotions too, is as I'm learning to feel my challenging emotions, I'm learning to feel the resourceful ones too. So I'm learning to notice, wait, I feel peace and I didn't notice I was feeling peace, or I felt content and I didn't even notice it. Learning to notice our positive emotions affects us as much as learning to notice our negative ones. Learning to narrate, wow, I'm feeling a lot of relief right now. It will amplify the emotion if you actually sit and learn how to feel the good feelings as well. So
Yeah, that was good. I can tell I feel a panic in my bladder.
because you got to go.
Yeah, so bad.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we love you all.
Hey, let's say this as we wrap this up.
Hey, if you share the episode with people, that's one of the best ways that the word gets out and emotional health spreads. It's contagious.
Share it with people.
Yeah.
It's a really big deal. And also, if you're looking at wanting to know more about our year-long life consulting masterclass, you can go to Justin and Abi, that's abi.com. And you can click under courses. You can look at the information there. You can, there's a place on our website to just type in and say, hey, I want to know more. I want to get on the list to possibly sign up for this. You can do that. And again, I know you want to hit the subscribe button on YouTube. I'm going to get it into your head.
Oh.
I did that with our podcast listeners before we got on YouTube.
Yeah.
Rate, review, subscribe, and share.
Okay.
Okay. Love you. Love you.
Love you.
Bye.
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 Bye.